Hey everybody, how's it going? Guys, my name is Miles Whitboyer, and if you have stumbled onto this YouTube page, hey guys, first things first, thank you so much for being here. The first 6 months of being a podcaster is like this wild whirlwind that I can't wait to share with you guys. A few of the quick tips and tricks that I've picked up over the last few months. Let me back up though. So I started a podcast about 6 months ago called the Photographic Collective Podcast. And listen, early on, I wasn't really sure where this whole thing was going to head. In fact, to be honest, I wasn't even sure if anybody was going to listen. And you know what has happened is a few of the biggest names in the photo industry, as well as just mindset coaches, people from all over the world have kind of come out of the woodworks wanting to be a part of this podcast. And the reason for that success, I think, comes down to really 3 quick tips that I want to give you guys. First things first. Your voice is super important. And what I mean by that is I think the more I listen to podcasts, the more I'm struck by the fact that often pretty poor conversationalists end up hosting these things. The reality, like the truth of the matter is you have to be able to drive your listeners to answer this simple question: why does it matter? Like, why does this podcast matter? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Who are you trying to hit? Who is the ideal listener for your podcast? If you can write that down and solve for that question, and then your voice becomes that solution, man, you've already got the biggest problem licked. And that's a big deal. That's a big task to take on. And so let me tell you how I did it really quickly. First things first, I made sure that I was already an expert in the field that I was talking about. Now, after 15 years of being a professional photographer all over the world, I already had kind of a Rolodex of relationships of people that I knew I could contact to talk with me about. But I also already knew how to speak their language. That's a big deal. Starting a podcast and not knowing enough about your topic, that's a dangerous, dangerous road to run down. Now, the other part about your voice mattering so much is that your audio quality has to be top notch. I will say that this SHURE mic was a major, major upgrade in the podcast. And about the first 4 or 5 episodes, I was using a Yeti mic. And listen, nothing against working with another mic system, but having a mic that actually captures the quality of your voice and allows you to sound articulate and put together, now that's a big, big part of this whole thing. And then making sure that if you are posting that podcast in any visual format, whether that's on YouTube or via Instagram Live, or you're sharing it anywhere where people can actually watch and digest it, that you're paying attention to the quality of your camera and the light around you so that your entire scene matches the demographic to whom you're speaking. All right, that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, make sure that you have a really solid editor. Now, this is something that I was I was fortunate enough to have right out of the gate. One of the employees that works with me day in and day out, one of my best friends, is a guy named Jared Fincher. And Jared is not only a talented photographer, he also is a really remarkable sound engineer. And he has the ability and the expertise to take my podcasts and chop them up to clean up the vocal quality, to clean up the audio quality, remove background noises, remove echoes, and all of the type of stuff that just shows up, i.e. my puppy sometimes appearing in the podcast. And to make sure that what is delivered, like what gets across to people, is a really finished, very polished, and yet very organic sounding product. That's huge. Now, I will tell you, it's entirely possible. It's incredibly possible for you to learn how to do this yourself. In fact, I think for most podcasters, the goal for them is like, how can I be a one-man band and make this thing work? And I'm not going to say that that's a bad idea, but I will say this. It's an incredibly saturated market. Just get on the iTunes podcast store or get on Spotify for a few minutes and start scrolling the top podcasts. And it's going to take you forever to get into the first couple that feel like they were done at home alone by a lone wolf. Most of these things are really well edited these days, and newsflash, it isn't very expensive to have somebody do that for you, but it is really necessary. So invest up front in the right equipment and in the right team around you to try and make this thing successful. And then step number 3, and I would say this is probably the most important part. you have to have a rollout plan. You have to have a rollout strategy. Now, clickbait here, I would love to help you develop that. And you can always drop me a DM via Instagram at @MilesWhitBoyer or an email, miles@mileswhitboyer.com for more information on that. But let me tell you this, whether it is simply just sharing your episodes on Instagram, or it's making sure that your keywords are showing up over on YouTube, or it's integrating a release process through the guests that you have involved, or it's creating a varsity list campaign that tags in key people in your life that have a vested interest in watching this program succeed. Whatever it is, however you're gonna roll out this product to people, let me say it as clear as possible. Starting a podcast is a lot of work. And if nobody hears it, it's a lot of wasted work. Now, don't get me wrong. I think I've probably learned as much about being a podcaster on the other end of the microphone from my guests as anybody that has listened to my podcast. In fact, I actually feel as though I'm really fortunate, like very blessed to have the opportunity to sit and get a first-person view in the education seat for the people that I'm talking with. But I'm not doing it just for me, right? And my assumption is that if you're starting a podcast, you're not doing it just for you. So create a social media strategy, create a marketing campaign. Once you have those three things put in place, the right equipment and the right voice, the right editor and the right software and the right team around you to make sure that these things are released in high quality in all of the podcast listening opportunities across Google, and we use Anchor, and iTunes and Spotify, and the list goes on and on and on. People find their podcasts in some really unique ways. You can also host, we host via our Squarespace page, because it's important to me that people can go right directly to my digital living room, right? The original metaverse, right, is just your URL, and people can find me there. They can find the podcast and all the information that they need in my URL. That's a big deal as well. And then lastly, that you have a rollout strategy, that you have a reason for people to listen and a way for people to listen, and you have an ability to tell people about what you're up to. Hey, listen, this is a quick hitter, 8 minutes long. My name is Miles Whitboyer. I would love for you to be listening to my podcast. I also would love for you to subscribe to this channel. If it says anything at all, the biggest goal for my 2023 season, late 2022 and 2023 season, is to start to really educate and pour into the photo and creative community. And we're doing so much of that over in our Facebook group that's called the Photographic Collective. We're also launching a group training program and protocol in this spring of 2022, that's going to allow small groups to come together in really unique and special ways to train across 6 different protocols, 6 different modules on everything from social media strategy and marketing to client experience, and even learning how to utilize light better through your camera. Guys, that's my big plug. Hey, thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.